It's time to start the conversation. It's time for an unauthorized caucus.
We going?
It's caucus time.
Cut. Cut.
It's mine now.
It's caucus time.
It's caucus time.
I was asking if we had started.
I know. I fooled you. That was mean, but I also don't care that much.
Welcome back.
I'm sorry. You do the intro because I stole it.
Welcome back, everybody, to Unauthorized Caucus. We've got a special one for you today. We are interviewing the great Paul List, author of Mount Doom, which unveils Tolkien's prophecy. Mind-blowing. Your mind is going to be blown. Yeah. Whether or not you have read Lord of the Rings or anything like that, your mind will be blown. He and his co-author have a wealth of knowledge, both from the Western tradition, going back to Aristotle and St. Thomas Aquinas, and then diving deep into the myths and legends of J.R.R. Tolkien to give a remarkable account of our present situation. So stay tuned for that. But before we get to that...
Yeah, I was going to say, before we get to that, let me remind you what makes this possible. First of all, thank you all for hanging on with us. We are obviously changing around our schedule a little bit. This isn't weekly, and it's not always as crisp as it used to be as far as the timing in between, but... we're coming back with a lot of good interviews that we're excited about. This one today, it's not just nerding out over Tolkien. This is actually going to be very relevant if you're interested in big questions that we as a society face over our return to Western civilization, over the artificial intelligence, the rise of AI, over transhumanism. So many things that we have big questions about and we need good answers to in America. It turns out there's a lot of really good wisdom buried deep inside, and it's not all that inaccessible, the layers of Tolkien's writing and all of his mythology across Lord of the Rings. So if you're not a Lord of the Rings fan, today has some really interesting stuff for you. I hope you'll enjoy it. But make sure you say thank you to our sponsors. First and foremost, go to phyllisschlafly.com. That's where you'll find the Phyllis Schlafly Eagles, where we're sitting now, where we work. Absolutely fantastic stuff there. There's always commentaries on the radio coming out every day. They're available on the website. You want to go and find them and share them. John and Andy Schlafly continuing a weekly column in the legacy of their mother. There's great stuff there. Plus events, phyllisschlafly.com is where you'll find all of that. And then specifically, if you want to support what we're doing here on this show, make sure you go and use the code CAUCUS30 at trexinc.com. Great apparel, a lot of different lifestyle stuff there, God, family, country. And then also we have a code down in the description of this video, or if you're listening on the podcast in the notes, you'll find a link for Wide Awake clothing. Use that link. A lot of cool Pro Sovereignty swag over there. Really neat stuff. Again, trexinc.com. Wide Awake clothing. Go look in the description of this podcast or this episode. You'll find it there. And then that's a great way to support. Also, unauthorizedcaucus.com is the little sub-website. You'll find the show, all of the notes, all of the links. Today, we will have a link to this book we're very excited to get to and talk to Paul List about. Again, Paul List and Ali Ghaffari, the two co-authors on this endeavor. And let's get into it. Paul List. Well, here we are, folks, back now and with, as introduced, Mr. Paul List. He is one half of the duo that put together this incredible book, Mount Doom, The Prophecy of Tolkien Revealed. Looking forward to getting into this, but as he says, I love the history on the back, or the biography on the back and on the website too. A man of many talents, but a cradle Catholic, self-educated philosopher, and in his spare time reads and rereads Aristotle and Aquinas. Obviously, and as we were just starting to talk about a little bit of the book, there's a lot of not just reading, but writing in there, especially with Ali, your co-author. So we're so excited to get to this. Paul, thank you for taking the time with us today.
Thank you very much for having me. I really appreciate the platform.
Oh, absolutely. We're thrilled to do it. And like I said, we get into all sorts of really interesting stuff here. You know, not just, we often cover politics and top of mind things, which is kind of how this came on my radar was, hey, here's a guy talking about warnings about AI, warnings about artificial intelligence, the virtual reality world we live in. And that just kind of spun off. And I saw, you know, the Tolkien reference and I'm like, oh, what is this? And I thought, no, we are far more comprehensive than just dealing with a single issue. This is really kind of unpacking one of the biggest literary achievements of our time. I think you even say in the book, maybe of all time. what Tolkien did in the Lord of the Rings trilogy specifically, and all the surrounding stuff. So, I mean, we would love, if you would just kind of give us a little bit of an overview. What led you to wanting to put this book together, put the pieces together for everyone? Because this, I mean, 500 something pages, and it sounds like you had to cut out about half of it. I mean, This is a labor of love. Where did this start for you? What brought it about?
Well, it's a labor of love. There's no doubt about that. But I have to be also honest. It was a labor inspired, at least, and motivated by fear. God gave me a vision. I'd just say an outer body transcendental vision that astonished me. I didn't really know what to think of it. One morning, about 1995, I guess, and then he put a holy fear in me that he opened my eyes, that I looked around and realized that nobody, no matter who it was, be it the pilot, the priest, the grocery store clerk, the traffic cop, the teacher, the construction worker, the farmer, nobody really was looking at the big picture of what was really going on. And it really scared me. It scared me. I've never been so scared in my life. It was just, it was a real game changer. And then it motivated me to read. And by God's grace, I had a few towns over here in northern Vermont. I had a few towns over, an old bookstore that cleaned out libraries and old estates. And so I had access to tens of thousands of old books from the 16th, or not 16th, but 17th, 18th, 19th century, early 20th century books. So I had a wealth of knowledge at my fingertips, and God just motivated me to and really put these books that I needed to read and the drive to read in my hands, and I did. And I read also a lot of other things. I read a lot of papal encyclicals, a lot of just a lot of things, everything that I really needed, that I really thought that I would need to know to understand what was going on, including things like Euclid's Elements, the harmonic overtone series I studied as a language, so I could look at a Beethoven score and tell you harmonically what he's doing, what he's saying, and discovered that that's how he wrote music, as a language, not from sound, but from principle. Beethoven wrote from principle, and that's why he was able to write his greatest works when he had been deaf for 25 years. He didn't need his ears. So that, and then I got involved in music and some other things. But then, after some time, I had a few years anyway, I had met my co-author. He had worked for me as a teenager, him and his younger brother. And Ali was he was a big heavy hitter in the education realm. As far as his education goes, he was a student at Phillips Exeter Academy, and he went on to he was going to be a brain surgeon he was studying pre-med and biology and whatnot in college. And then I had a conversation with him, and I had been reading quite intensely by that point, and he hit up against me a reading, and I was reading, and he was just going to school, and I kind of shook his world, that it showed him that his store-bought education was totally inadequate, and it really changed his life. And he actually converted too and became Catholic too. And then I picked up the Tolkien mythology, because I always loved Tolkien from a very early age. And after I'd given myself a scholastic education, which is the philosophy of Christianity before the Enlightenment, Bacon and Descartes and company poo-pooed on Aristotle and Aquinas and the scholastics and kicked them out, and just focused on physics and mathematics and got rid of metaphysics. But then I looked at the Tolkien mythology with a scholastic education, and oh my God, I realized that this is all Thomas Aquinas versus Descartes. And this is all, the language of the machine, ones and zeros, the one ring, ones and zeros, and it's digital, against the harmonic overtone series, the language of all of motion, of all of God's creation. And I realized that this was a prophecy. This isn't just mere fantastic entertainment and beautifully written. It's so much more beautiful when you realize what is really going on than you ever imagined, even by reading and studying the books. And the reason that nobody has ever been able to really understand what Tolkien was getting at, for instance, why they never understood who Tom Bombadil and Goldberry are, because they're looking at it from a Cartesian education. They were educated in a modern compulsory Descartes Enlightenment mentality, and those very few people maybe who still had a scholastic education to some degree, apparently never looked at the Tolkien mythology, because once you put those two together, it's bam, they come together like hand and glove. And then I decided, well, I have to write a book, and I encouraged and recruited my young friend Ali Ghaffari, who allowed me to mentor him and get him into the whole scholastic movement, the whole scholastic worldview too, and it changed his life too. He became a F-18 pilot and then went on to teach at the Naval Academy. And I recruited Ali because I knew that Ali is a doer. He's an absolute doer in the material realm. Ali can get anything done. He's amazing, and I needed that because my head's always in the clouds, and I had all this figured out in my head, and I'd written by hand. I'd written all these essays, and I didn't know what to do with them. So I encouraged Ali to, hey, let's help me write a book and help me put it together. So Ali is the material force that made this book a reality. I wouldn't have done it without him. It still would have been up in my head, and I would have moved on to something else to entertain my very active imagination. And but that's what really inspired me. And then God provided me with everything that I needed. He provided me with Ali. Ali was the fundamental. He was the bridge between my imagination and my education, and to make it a material thing, which is that book.
So the book Mount Doom, which all of our readers should check out, and over the course of this interview, we are not even going to scratch the surface of the deep message here, or the deep message in Tolkien or in Aquinas, because you can go so deep into all of them. But it was remarkable to me reading the book, and really blew my mind, because I haven't read all of Lord of the Rings. I started the Fellowship of the Ring a few weeks ago when Ryan said teased the idea of interviewing you, and I was like, oh, I've been meaning to read those. I got to read those. So I'm about 300 pages into the Fellowship of the Ring, but and haven't read much Aquinas in my life. But so diving into this book, my mind was blown, because scholasticism and the deep lore of Tolkien, fitting those together. But I was wondering if you could tell us a little bit about what your interpretation of Tolkien's message is, especially in regards to the mapping of the internal of the human being and the mind, and how that works.
Well, I mean, as you probably read in the book, at this point, if you're a good piece into the book, you probably realize that you come across that diagram of the frenetic diagram of the brain, the areas of the old Victorian pseudoscience of frenetics, where they claim to be able to, this is where our imagination is. This is where hate and crime and fear is. And this is all these areas. This is where love comes from. And this is our rational this and that. And that's the map that he started with. In many interviews, Tolkien would say, in some famous writing, he said that I very wisely started with a map. And that map was that Victorian map, that Middle Earth is the material brain. So it's laid out in the frenetic map of the human head. So Tolkien uses, he makes Arda, which, if you haven't read the Silmarillion or the background, Arda is the whole being, what Tolkien calls the world that was, and he uses the world in a secondary etymological sense, where we considered the lifetime of a man as the world, as I point out in the book. So it's not, he's very, very good with words, and he uses them. Sometimes he'll use them up into 3 different meanings. All 3 meanings he'll have in there, in that one word, and he's a language master. So he takes this little kingdom that he calls the world that was. He makes it into a representative human being, a substantial being, as Aquinas called this. The human person is a substance, one substance. It's made up of the substance of the immaterial soul and the biological body, but when they come together in God's creation, and that body is at conception, it creates the substantial unity. And human beings are the only creature that bridges the material realm, the perishable, timely material realm that we can sense, smell, touch, taste, see, hear, like the rest of the animals. We bridge that in our mind with the angelic realm of the immaterial, imperishable realm of the intellect, the angelic realm. And we're the only creatures that do that. Angels don't do that. Animals don't do that. Only man does that. So that Tolkien keeps that the essence of the substantial unity, and he makes a human person named Arda. But it's not an actual human person. It's a representative human person that represents the whole history of Western civilization. Our past, our present, quote unquote, and our future. And that's where the prophecy comes in, the prophecy about the future, our future. And so what goes on in Middle Earth is the material brain. So he gives character, he gives personality and character. So these facets and attributes of the rational soul can actually participate in a story. He doesn't, for instance, the hobbits are habits. They are the habits. The word habit is used 9 times in the whole Lord of the Rings. It's used 8 of those 9 times in one chapter, and that chapter is the prologue concerning hobbits. Okay, and then he uses it one more time talking about Gandalf, and Gandalf is an intellectual habit. He's a habit. He's one of the 5 ways in which man acquires knowledge, according to Aristotle's Nicomachean Ethics, and Tolkien names them the wizards. So Gandalf is philosophical wisdom. First gray and uncertain. He's pre-revelation, pagan, Aristotle, Aquinas, or Aristotle, Plato, Socrates, those. And then when he falls, and he actually falls in the body and is subjected to the ideology of Darwinism, okay, to try to convince him that he's just an animal, he comes out, and when he comes back and he's brought back on the wings of the eagles, and the eagles are the good reading that we do. They serve Manwë. Manwë is the power of sight. He comes back, and now he's a Thomistic theologian. He's the most powerful intellectual facet of the mind, and he's no longer doubtful. He's no longer gray, and he owns and he takes for himself ownership, the spirit of decisiveness, and that spirit of decisiveness is Shadowfax. Yeah, I need to be exactly where I need to be. There's no more doubt, no more hesitation. But I probably have jumped ahead a little too far into it. But your original question, Mason, was what brought about this. The reading, and the writing of the book. It really started with fear. It really started with that God put a fear in me, gave me a vision, and then gave me the fear that went along with it, and it motivated me to write. And of course, I wrote it out of love, not just for Tolkien, not for just for J.R.R. Tolkien, but also as we dedicate the book to his mother, Mabel, who died for the faith. She was a martyr for the faith, to pass on the faith to her 2 young sons. And we would never have any knowledge of J.R.R. Tolkien at all, very likely, if it hadn't been for his mother, Mabel, who's a hero and I'm sure a saint.
Now, you say she was martyred. Would you share that story with us? What exactly happened?
Well, she, she was Anglican. Both sides of her parents, her in-laws, and her, because Anglicanism is the state religion, very anti-Catholic, had been pushed out by the government. By the king's men, etc. And she did her research and she became Catholic. And this was right after her husband, Arthur, had died in South Africa, I think of malaria or one of the fevers, the insect-borne fevers. And she was back in England. She had come back with the 2 young boys because they were born in South Africa. And Arthur died. He was a banker. And the biography's in the book at the end of the book, a short biography on her. But her and her sister had converted to Catholicism. And that really, really irritated her family, both sides of her family. And they would not support her. They would give her no material support at all unless she came back to Anglicanism, but the Baptists, or one of the Protestant denominations that they were associated with. And she said no. Her sister did. Her sister's husband, her brother-in-law, had insisted that she did, and she was obedient, and she did. But Mabel had no such. Arthur was dead, and she was not going to return. And she had found the pearl of great price, and she was willing to suffer for it. And she basically died very young, at about 34, of a very treatable diabetes, which was malnutrition, basically. And she had turned her young sons over by that time, before she died, to the authority, and as their father or their guardianship of her 2 young boys, over to Father Francis Morgan, who had been John Henry Newman's personal secretary for 25 years. So she had, and this is a lot of little things that people don't realize. John Henry Newman plays a big part in the mythology, and not least of which he names the Numenorians after the highest reason, the Numenorians. And if you haven't read the Silmarillion, you don't know who they are. But Aragorn is a disciple, or a descendant of them. And John Henry Newman, they lived in John Henry Newman's personal cottage for a time with John Henry Newman's grave. Mabel and John and Hilary, the two boys, John Henry Newman's grave was not far from the front door. So he had a huge influence. Father Francis Morgan had a huge influence. And so that was how that Mabel had actually given up her life to make sure that John, J.R.R. and Hilary both maintained the original Catholic. This is before this synodal crap that's going on right now in the Vatican, this new religion that they're trying to pass off as Catholicism. I've got a little opinion about that.
we can hear that.
Yeah. Well, yeah. So she said no, she would not come back, and she actually died to prevent her boys. She passed on the faith to them, and it left a deep, deep, deep impression on J.R.R. Tolkien. And you can read that in his letters, particularly to his son Christopher. And Mabel was a huge influence on both of them, but we know about it from John. She taught J.R.R. like 2 or 3 languages, and all about botany and art. And she was a wonderful artist and a wonderful pianist. So Tolkien, J.R.R. had music in his background, but he also, with his grandfather, one of his grandfathers, I can't remember which one off the top of my head, he was also a piano technician and a piano tuner. So if you know anything about that, and I've got some experience with that, the harmonic overtone series plays a huge part in the traditional, pre-equal temperament, pre-avant-garde, pre-early 20th century mess that they made of music with equal temperament. That was part of it. But the temperaments played a big part in that. So this language of music through the harmonic overtone series is the most fundamental language of creation. And Tolkien would know that. Being the world's leading philologist, he spoke like 12 languages. So he took that language that Beethoven used to write with too. And he took that language and pitted it directly against the most brutal, ugliest, utilitarian language of death, which is on, off binary code, the machine code, the language of the machine. And that's part of what's being waged, this war right now that's going on here, but is going on very clearly in the mythology.
Yeah, so that's something we wanted to dive into here, definitely, because that really seems like the imminent central conflict that we are facing as Christians and as people upholding the Western tradition, and just seeing technology and the rate at which it's changing. So I was pretty curious about a lot of in chapter 7 with
well, I was gonna say before we dive into that, because that's going to lead us into a long discussion. I was just going to say this is very appropriate for this moment, because it's something we discuss quite a bit here on the show. We're really starting to see the beginnings of a resurgence toward the foundations of Western civilization. It almost seems like, just bringing it up to a modern day political conversation for a moment, the young people of America, particularly young men, have just been trashed and thrashed and thrown aside by the modern materialist liberal movement. And modern liberalism's kind of, I'm hopefully saying this, has had its heyday. And a lot of people looking and saying, I don't want it anymore. I'm tired of the modern world of virtual reality. I'm tired of modern music. I'm tired of this. I'm tired of modern religion. I'm looking for the foundations, the tradition. It's leading people back to some very good and serious discussions. And I'm so excited, because this is one of those things that has been brought forward successfully. I mean, and I do appreciate, like I started to say when we were talking off air, I love that you all, mention the movies and say, yeah, the films are great, but the films are what they are. They are not the entirety of Tolkien, but they were handled, well. And that's kind of a gateway drug for a lot of people to go back and, I'd like to read this. And then the more, deep you get into it, the more layers they start to discover. And then they find, works like yours, and Ali's and see what's going on. I mean, it blows my mind to go into this, but none of it is really surprising to me, because I remember in old 1962, I found this when I first read The Hobbit and Lord of the Rings with my oldest, and we're due to do this with my next kid, with our second son now. But our oldest son, when I read it with him, it was just like, this is incredible. And I could just see he was riveted. His, mind was turning. And I thought, I remembered an old 1962 interview I saw with Tolkien where I forget the BBC interviewer, he asked him about, how in the world could you do all of this, write these languages? What was this? And I remember Tolkien said, I had to pull up the quote in my notes. He said, because being made by a creator, one of our natural factors is wishing to create. But since we aren't creators, we have to subcreate. Let's say rearrange the primary material in some particular form which pleases. And the more you get into this, you realize, man, he's just like, all we're doing is drawing from principles that exist and creating a story out of it. But it really is just incredible the length someone will go to. And it really, I appreciate that you bring in, Beethoven and some of the, so many classic, fantastic artists. This is not just, it sounds pretty. There is a mythology, not a mythology, a methodology to this. No, this is ordered. Because a God of order created us, and these are the materials we have to work with. It just expands. And that is so exciting, I think, to a new generation of students who are looking around, breaking out of the schooling that they've gotten, looking for education and saying, there's so much stuff here. Let's go deeper. And this is an incredible opportunity for that, especially because it is still so culturally relevant today. Thank you to the movies, which, by the way, I have to ask as a side before you dive into 7, you talk about the harmonics and everything. I got to ask, one of our favorite parts, I think most people, Tolkien fans, out of the films was the scoring. How do you think Howard Shore did with that? Did he honor Tolkien in that way, or was
I don't think that that Tolkien. I think for a movie score, the way he tied things together and used certain thematic materials in different ways to tie it to something else, but now it's presented in a different context. I think that's what good scoring does. I mean, I've had some movies in particular that I enjoyed the score. I mean, I enjoyed very much the score when I was younger man in my more virile and go get 'em days. I really enjoyed the score to the original Conan the Barbarian movie with Arnold Schwarzenegger. That's an epic score. And that's another example of great score writing. And it's got kind of a cult following, and I include that in one of the chapters. I think it's a chapter on Shelob. I give an idea of my progression of reading and how I was able to read so much and why. And I make very clear that you have to start by reading something that you like. You have to start by reading something that you really enjoy. Otherwise, your intellectual endurance and capacity is going to remain shriveled. Because, I mean, if you just try to pick up Aquinas and start reading, you're going to be face down in the book, dead unconscious asleep in about a paragraph.
Yeah.
But not just that, you have to really have read Plato and Aristotle and Augustine, at least their stuff, before you even think about, and then a lot of other of the church fathers and doctors before you really even engage in something like the Contra Gentiles or the Summa Theologia. You have to really make sure that you've done your homework before. You don't just jump into that. That's like jumping, doing helicopter skiing off of, whatever, Mount Everest, for crying out loud. And you haven't prepared for it, So I think that the getting back to the movies, I think that, and the score, I think the score was really good. And I think that they presented, when I first sat down at the movie at Fellowship of the Ring, even though the beginning was different, and I had some issues with what they said, 9 rings were gifted to men. And so, well, no, they weren't really. I mean, it makes it sound like it's kind of misleading. Sauron captured the rings, destroyed many rings, and all we hear about are the ones that survived. Okay. As we point out, when I describe what the Rings of Power were and how many there actually would have been, it's all according to the harmonic overtone series. So the Rings of Power are actually given out according to the dominant ninth chord. And that's why the dominant ring, and at the base of that, in harmony, what generate the generator tone of the one ring is a digital imitation of what would have been the analog tone. So Tolkien gives us a brilliant description of how technology will cross the digital analog barrier, and it's through harmonics. Okay. And that's also taken out of one of Alan Turing's obscure but very important papers that Tolkien read. So have I. The chemical basis of morphogenesis, 1952. So he talks about how things are developed and grown according to mathematics and according to the mathematics of spherical harmony, the spherical harmonics, although he just uses a ring in his paper of cells, and that of course becomes the one ring, and that is the digital code. So I mean, this you'll have to kind of rein me in, you guys, because it's so complicated and it's so beautiful and so wonderful that I'll get off on some tangent and we'll lose track. But you ask about the
it's
score.
That's good.
You ask about the score, and I enjoyed the score, and I thought the first three movies were well done, even though they were very deceptive. They changed many things, which were really destructive but they didn't know any better. Like they left out Tom and Goldberry, and Peter Jackson said they didn't add anything to nobody's ever known who they are because nobody's looked at it from a psychological scholastic, not modern psychology, which is bankrupt, but real scholastic philosophy. And then you realize that all the gods, quote unquote, the Ainur, the powers that were, as Tolkien calls them, are the 14 the facets of the soul, the facets of the rational soul, the vegetative powers, our senses, the exterior powers, the interior powers, concupiscence and irascibility, and then above that our rational intellect made in the image of God, our free will and our intellect, which includes our conscience, and those are the trees of light. And they wax and wane actually according to the harmonic overtone series of modulation, what we call the circle of fifths, but it's actually, as I point out, I call it the spiral of fourths. And I describe how Tolkien uses that. And then when they're killed by Ungoliant, which is Shelob's mother, she is mortal sin, they fall, Arda, this person that it's all about, that represents the Western civilization, falls into mortal sin, and all darkness the mind is darkened, and then the spirits of the trees of light are transferred into new bodies made by Aule, who is the spirit, the faculty of growth of the vegetative. And he also made the dwarves earlier, many eons before. So he had already made living bodies, and with the Luvatar, God, they had been given, life and independent freedom beyond Aule's will. So Aule, it doesn't say this in the book, but I figured out it's very logical. Aule had made new bodies for the spirits of the trees of light. Telperion, the silver tree, it was Tom Bombadil. And he is the free will, but he's fallen now, and he's in Middle Earth, and he's confined to the material realm, the material brain. And his wife Goldberry, who gets her name from the golden fruit, the last golden fruit taken from the golden tree as it died, that contained its spirit. Tolkien uses that. It's a golden fruit was a berry. The fruit was a berry. That's where she gets her name. So there's all kinds of these little hints that Tolkien's been giving us right along, but nobody's ever picked up on them. So the whole mythology is really about the destiny of Tom and Goldberry, and he says that very early in the Silmarillion about the trees of light. They were the greatest things that were the greatest things that were created, and it's about their destiny. All of the Eldar days are about. Well, they died very early in the first age. And the Eldar days continue into probably the fourth age, which isn't included in the mythology. So where did their spirits go? They went to Tom Bombadil and Goldberry. And that's why Tom can do anything he wants. Anything. He's the free will. But that's why he also is very acquiescent to his wife, Goldberry. She is the rational intellect and the conscience. So it's a very beautiful once you understand. So the whole mythology is about the destiny of the free will and the conscience and the intellect of a representative human being called Arda, who represents body and soul as a substantial unity, represents Western civilization. Now in the second age, that's pulled apart and becomes the dualism of Descartes. And that's the fall of Numenor. And that's the estranging of the immaterial mind from the material brain. And that's the submersion of all of the Beleriand in the first age is submerged under the sea. And the sea is the realm of the feeling. So it all becomes feeling and not intellectual power anymore in that part of the frontal lobe of the brain in that map. And it's just magnificent. And then the way Tolkien weaves so many a lot of people have made it very clear. Oh yeah, he used this from this, Finnish or Norse or whatever, these mythologies, and that's about as far as they go. But he used so much other contextual and important things, particularly from Blessed Anne Catherine Emmerich, who was probably, I think, the most important visionary in church history. And I think her time has come again to really rise as a superstar. She was the vision, her Dolores Passions, which actually Mel Gibson turned into the Passion of the Christ. So she's but he uses a lot of her visions woven in very beautifully and subtly woven into the whole mythology. So Peter Jackson and company did a pretty good job of catching the flavor and the feel, and the score was very important for that.
Yeah.
But as far as actually understand, of course he didn't understand what was going on. And frankly, if Hollywood or who the powers that be understood really what Tolkien was getting at, they probably would have never made a movie.
That's true.
About it, because it's too offensive to our modern Cartesian scientific technology worldview right now, and a very atheistic, progressive, liberal worldview. That they would have smashed it, they would have crushed it.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And
sorry, I side railed there, but I'm not sorry. I'm not at all sorry, because again, to the whole point of this conversation, we can almost barely scratch the surface.
Yeah.
Let alone the Tolkien's mythology. So I'm happy for any little dive off we can get to give people. You were headed for chapter 7 though, specifically.
So I was very curious about both your perception and Tolkien's perception of technology, because chapter 7, which is about Alan Turing, and you detail the way that Tolkien was going to be very involved with decrypting the German messages during World War II, but then he realized, oh, I'm not doing language work here. This isn't philology. This is technology.
Exactly.
I think the way you describe it is Alan Turing's kind of lays the intellectual groundwork for, the Turing machine, the computation, as like an abstract model for computation. And we call something Turing complete when it's like able to compute any sort of mathematical computation. But I was, and I have a few questions about this chapter that I don't want to go way too down the rabbit hole. So I kind of just want to get the broader brush of what's the distinction between like continuous natural reality and virtual / digital reality, and like what is it that makes virtual / digital reality so dangerous to mankind?
Well, if you go, I think somewhere a little deeper in the book, because again, I don't have all the contents, because I can't remember what got put in the book as essential and what had to get cut out to pare it down to only 576 pages. I describe in philosophy, Tolkien's mythology is so fundamentally rooted in philosophy that to miss that, you've missed the whole forest for the trees. And very early, I describe very early in philosophy, philosophical pursuits, which would have been back probably as early as Thales, for crying out loud, or earlier than that, probably back in even before Abraham. Early philosophers looked around the world of creation and wondered, and motion particularly, is this animated world that we see, is it continuous? In other words, can I divide it continually, and never find a disconnect? Now, people will say, well, that's the atom. Well, that's on a material basis, and we can go down to Planck length, for crying out loud, as tiny, super microscopic particles, and find certain particles and say, well, see, there's a division between that and that. That's not really what I'm talking about at all. That's on a material realm. But on the realm of actual motion and movement and change, they wondered, is it continuous? Which, in other words, they called it, is it infinitely divisible, or is it made up of undivisible or indivisible parts, like particles or like pixels? So they wondered, because they couldn't tell, they wouldn't be able to tell the difference. They knew then that if it was really, they couldn't tell the difference. They didn't know if it was all connected or if it was just a bunch of little tiny parts and we can't see the difference. So basically, they had the essence of the idea of the struggle, the contest, or the contradiction between analog, which what we always called analog, which is that continuous, undivided, continuously, infinitely divisible reality, like dropping the needle on a vinyl album. Okay, that's analog. It's continuous as much. There's no break in it, as opposed to the digital reality, say a compact disc, which is made up of a bunch of samplings that might, is so fast and so accurate that you can't hear the spacing in it. But the whole idea was humans can't tell the difference, and ultimately our brains won't be able to tell the difference either when these come together. And that's the bridge that Tolkien predicted would be the bridge between and the barrier, the digital barrier, enter into the analog realm, which our mind is analog, as Aristotle made clear in his physics by juxtaposing distance and time. It's infinitely divisible. So we live in an analog reality, but the reality is that this digital alternative, if it's well done, we can't tell the difference. Our senses can't tell the difference. Our brains can't tell the difference. Okay, so it's very, very dangerous. So it's only up until now, even though this idea, this alternative, it's an alternative to this reality. It's a virtual reality. That idea is thousands of years old. These ideas are not new. What is new, relatively new, is the mathematics. Alan Turing really went a long way, because he's a very gifted mathematician, went a long way in describing the mathematics of change on a very, very, very minute level. Okay, and his ideas about what intellect is, just imitation in his terms, and how a soul can actually eventually, or be, if God wills, be granted a soul. A machine can be granted a soul, or we can download our soul. It's where the machine would harbor our soul. So these ideas aren't new at all. And now, but what is new is the fact that we've developed our technology and materials and techniques to construct these machines that will actually make this alternative reality a thing. And it's a thing. And now it's being pushed by the powers that be, demonic powers that be, pushed on us as an alternative to God's creation. And it's going to call us in. And it's fooling a lot of people already who think it's alive and think they can live in there. They think they can live in there in this virtual realm without consequences. And no, I don't never be hungry, never suffer, and I'll just have eternal life and this and that. And it's like, really, are you really that dumb to think that these guys that are pushing this on us are going to spend even a penny keeping you alive forever? No, you're going to be dead. You're going to be called into the machine as an alternative to this reality in transhumanism, as a logical extension of the process of evolution. Well, we were once monkeys, and now we just joined with machines, and we have eternal life in the machine. It's directly opposed to our eternal life with Christ. It's directly opposed to that.
Well, yeah, that's really interesting. And further on in that chapter, talking about good machines versus bad machines, because like you and your co-author acknowledge that it's not like everything's bad, but Tolkien even had that distinction with magic kind of functioning as a stand-in for technology, and there being the magic of the elves versus the magic of Sauron.
Right.
And I'm wondering how what the distinction between those is, and like when that maps onto our reality, if that distinction is about the intention of a creator of technology or the intention and the use of technology.
Well, probably both, but I just like to harken back, in my opinion, and my pretty well studied rational opinion about the nature of technology as an offshoot of our fallen nature. If Adam and Eve hadn't fallen, and that's reality, and I point out in that book very clearly that Adam and Eve were real people, and the anthropology and the archaeology and the archaeology line up exactly with the biblical record of exactly where and when Adam were, and there was a distinct change in the human being. Okay, so I have a very different take, and it's kind of shocking a lot of people, my take on the nature of Adam and Eve. Okay, and I put the whole prospect of evolution, whether or not any part of this it came from another species of a monkey, it doesn't matter. If it happened millions of years ago, and it has nothing to do with the reality of Adam and Eve, who were on Earth in Mesopotamia 6,000 years ago. Okay, and So I just put that aside, okay? But the nature of technology is it's born of our fallen nature. It's born of our corrupted will to dominate, to dominate, to dominate nature and to dominate other people. And it's at the essence of why we're at war with each other. We're not at war for resources, as people like to say. Oh, we're only in there for the oil. Well, I mean, that's a kind of a distraction. I mean, it's all about power and domination. So really at the heart of it. If we had never fallen and we were still honored our covenant with God in paradise, and we reproduced according to God's original plan, not like animals, okay, there would be no need for any technology at all. Not all technology, though, as long as we order it rightly under the heading of subcreation, is bad. For instance, I don't think the technology of harnessing a workhorse to drag logs out of the woods is an evil. I don't think harnessing the flow of water in a water wheel is evil. I don't think that. I think there are a lot. I don't think necessarily the technology that brought about my watch, my self-winding non-digital watch, no battery, no technology other than just parts. I don't think that's evil. I think these things are good and they're useful, and they can to some degree help humanity live and suffer less. There's no doubt about it. But what at the heart of this is the new scientific method that was advanced by the father of the modern scientific method, which is Francis Bacon. And I've read his Novus Organum twice at least. And that's where he lays out all the conditions and all the aims of the new modern science, which is all about discovering the attributes of things in the world, be them the stars or insects or fire or whatever. Once we understand and we can replicate those attributes, we can make anything. We can force out of nature anything that we want. And ultimately, once that happens, we start pushing each other around too. And it's just by our fallen nature. So I don't think that all technology is bad. Just as I don't think that Tolkien thought all technology was bad, but I think that once we start using it to dominate nature and wring things out of nature that we want by our pride and our greed, and then ultimately do that to people, which the globalists are doing to us right now using this technology, wringing the life out of us is what they're trying to do. That's their ultimate end, is depopulation. I think it becomes a great evil. It's a great deadly weapon in the hands of fallen men, and we have to reclaim. And I think that's at the heart of why so many young men, particularly, are returning to the traditional way of life. There's a huge insurgent of young men returning to the Catholic Church in England and other European countries because it's what has always been there for 2,000 years. And they don't want anything to do with all this modern confusion and this modern, this enlightenment, these innovations that have done nothing but make us blind. And so, I mean, I hope that answered your question to some degree. But we have to really step back from the machine. We really have to step back from the machine. And Tolkien uses the language of the machine as its ultimate weakness, because without the language of the machine, it's just a blob. It can't do anything without the language. Even if you put power to it, without the language, it can't function. So the language of the machine is at the heart of every technological, digital technology, whether it's the surveillance state, digital money, the virtual realm, artificial intelligence, robotics, all of these self-driving cars, all these things rely on the language of the machine. So that's part of its Achilles heel. We have to pull away from that machine and understand that that machine encompasses almost everything in our life in the modern world, including what we eat, including what we see, what we hear, what we breathe. Everything is part of that machine, and we can't look at things abstracted from each other. We have to look at everything as part of a piece in the war machine, like Hitler's part in the piece of the war machine. We can't look at the tank division over here isolated from what's going on in the North Atlantic with the U-boats. Okay, they all have the same goal, and the goal is the destruction of mankind. Here, it's to put an end to God's creation. And they do that by tempting people to come in and join the alternative, the virtual realm. And that's what it's doing.
Well, then, I mean, I'm the practical side of our conversations. Typically, I know it makes us a good duo typically, because we'll go deeper into philosophy and history, and I'll say, okay, but practically for me, right now in 2025, this is part of it. I so appreciate. And again, another connection, we have I'm flabbergasted and excited that we have a vice president of the United States who in a public interview talked about, the old Christian principle, really, this ordo amoris. And I was like, oh my gosh, he just referenced Augustine. This is since when? But I appreciate it too. We bring that in, you talk about the ordo amoris, Augustine, the right ordering of love.
That was Aquinas.
I'm sorry, Aquinas, not Augustine. But looking at that though, I mean, if we're accepting the claim here that Tolkien is foreseeing not technological advancement, but I would say technological enslavement, then how would we apply that doctrine of ordered love, but also disordered desire? How would that help us resist the digital idols that we're facing today?
Well, just back to the myth, keeping it in the confines of the mythology, and Arda, this representative human being within which the Middle Earth resides. Okay, Arda at this time in the Third Age, when they're fighting Sauron, who is AI, with the eye, the scanner eye, right out of Alan Turing's 1936 paper on computable numbers, that's looking for the one ring on the tape. Okay, the eye is always looking for the one ring. Okay. We have to understand that you got to bring. I got so much going on in my head right now. You guys have opened up so many opportunities to so it's easy for me to kind of get lost. But I think what your point was, how does this apply? How do we apply this to our time in history right now? And the time that of the destruction of the ring, Arda is in a state of transhumanism. Okay, this Arda, this condition that Frodo and Gandalf and all the characters, who represent these different attributes and essences of the rational soul, are fighting. Arda has the microchip. That is the Tower of Barad-dûr. Okay, that's the microchip in the cerebellum. That's Mordor. Mordor is the cerebellum. If you look on that frenetic diagram, that's the realm of all fear, crime, hate, envy, all that stuff, all the negative stuff. That's Mordor. So so what Tom Bombadil and Goldberry do is they realize that they're in an awful, awful state of enslavement, already microchipped, already in deep, deep, deep trouble. Gollum has been eating them alive. He's been watching pornography. Shelob is alive and well, and that is pornography. He's in a terrible state of dualism. Thanks to Descartes, his faith is fading. He's in awful dire straits. His last ditch effort is he has to make changes in his life, and he has to do away with the microchip, and he has to get rid of the ring once and for all. Tom and Goldberry call the cardinal virtues, our highest habits. This is Aquinas again. Temperance is Frodo. Fortitude is Sam. They're the interior. They moderate. That's why Frodo is the only one that can carry the ring, because that's temperance. That moderates our lusts and our desire for physical pleasure. Gollum is intemperance. That's why he calls Frodo master. Not because Frodo has the ring. Frodo's the only one that can have the ring. Gollum wants it back at all costs because he wants to be able to slake his lust, dealing with Shelob, which he'd done before. Okay. And slaking everything that he can out of the screen. Okay, so Arda's in terrible shape, and we have to take Tolkien's advice. We have to reorder our lives, get our psychology back in order, and we have to cultivate virtue. We have to cultivate the cardinal virtues, and we have to take control of our education. If you've been indoctrinated in the modern education, and all of us had to some degree, you are in a terrible state of intellectual disrepair and disorder, particularly if you've ever studied philosophy at the academic realm. They're the most confused people in the world, unless you get a decent philosophy teacher, like out of a decent Christian college like Hinsdale or Steubenville or Ave Maria, or one of the true Christian higher education, but very few of us have. So you have to take control and charge of your own education, and we have to really take control and charge of our diet. We have to take control and charge of our health. We really do. We have to understand that these things are all joined: big ag, big pharma, big tech, big food, fast food. All this stuff is all part of the war machine. Just like Hitler had a very vast and diverse capacity in his war machine, these people have a very vast and diverse capacity in their war machine, and the war is on humanity. The powers, the demonic powers want us sick, fat, stupid, sterile, and ultimately dead. And so we have to look at everything as a whole, and we have to take a holistic approach, just as our enemies that are pushing transhumanism on us and pushing us into this hell world of this technological advancement of artificial intelligence. They've taken a holistic approach on their attack on humanity, and we have to respond in a holistic approach to defend ourselves and push back. And that means we can't go to McDonald's. We can't go to, Arby's or Pizza Hut, or, we can't just buy whatever, whatever we pick up at the grocery store. We have to take more responsibility for our health. We have to get in shape, physically get in shape, and realize that every ounce of fat that we don't need that's on us is an opportunity and a storage unit for all the poisons they want on us. And it attacks our mind, and it makes us dumber. Dumb people make good slaves. People that are trying, that are intellectually trying, and we're all capable. Most of us are much more capable than we ever give ourselves credit for. But we never really try. We never really make the effort. And if you're going to make advancement, you need to have a good prayer life too. And you need to ask for help, and you need to ask for understanding, and ask and you will receive. I did a lot of asking, and I received.
That part, that was my next question. You just partly answered, Paul, is so what do we, how would Tolkien engage with today's debate on AI and transhumanism? And that's, you gave a little bit of the answer there, but that was my wrap up.
Well, we have to cultivate virtue by taking, and by becoming better men. We cannot participate in pornography. Not at all. That is the ultimate trap. That is the stickiest, trappiest, gooeyest evil that we can possibly get involved in. And that is the bait for the trap. And it's trapping a lot of people, and particularly young men. And it's making them incapable of having families, incapable of having a psychologically right ordered relationship with a woman. And I see it a lot, and I talk to a lot of young men, and it's just debilitating. And it also makes you less intelligent. That's been clinically proven. We use the example of the Billie Eilish singer, where she came right out and said a few years ago that I watched so much pornography, it was crazy, and it just ruined my brain. She said that it just ruined her brain. So we have to take responsibility and be very careful. We have to, what we need to do, you guys? We need to make being intelligent and being virtuous fashionable again. And I think that a lot of young men are realizing that, and they're waking up to the fact that, and a lot of young women are too. They're realizing that that virginity has value, great value, and I'm not going to kid anybody or sugarcoat anybody. There's going to be a lot of people that are so far gone in this rabbit hole, they're incapable, that they won't pull themselves out. They've gone so far down into the hole, they can't even see the light. I'd like to be able to show it to them so they'd at least start climbing. But there's a lot of people who have no desire to come out of the hell that they've put into, and they'll do everything in their capacity to pull other people into that hell to participate, because misery loves company. So in the state Arda that's in at the destruction of the ring, Frodo and Sam are just absolutely racked with pain, thirst, exhaustion. They're being dogged by Gollum. That's an addiction now, intemperance. And that's going to be the condition that it's going to take for a lot of people to climb Mount Doom and destroy the ring. And we have to destroy the ring and get the ring out of our lives. This is not a bad use of technology. Getting this message out is great. But when we start using this technology to slake our lusts and further, feed our fallen nature, it becomes an instrument of evil.
Yeah. To replace that which is natural and good and ordered. And that's why I so appreciate that you take it back. It's not just living inside a virtual reality world or a video game or full on transhumanism. I'm going to cryogenically freeze my brain and live on forever. It's no, this is absolutely connected to, and starts even earlier. It goes back even almost before the digital age. You go to, pornography or something like that. You're looking at replacing this great gift, this real thing that God has given us, a perversion of it that replaces it. And what does it do? It disconnects us, not just from other people. It disconnects us from our creator. And it's now, especially, in the age of the internet and computers, it's on steroids, and also in many different flavors and forms. And it's not just that, it's all the different offerings, but at each point it is getting away from the reality, which, as we've talked about this whole conversation with, Tolkien's sub-creation, this is all here. It's been created. This is what we have to work with. And you can certainly pervert pieces of it to replace that reality there. It's just, it's fascinating.
They're doing it all the time, and it's all connected. It's all connected by the One Ring. The One Ring, the language of the machine, binary code makes it all possible. Okay. And I go into the book and I give some of the history of the machine and the development of the machine in confluence with the age of mathematics, and particularly when it gets into like Boolean algebra and trying to determine truth factors mathematically, where that came from, Leibniz and whatnot, and then this whole notion of first and second order logic and whatnot, that we've tried to wring truth out of mathematics. So we've replaced Christ, the truth himself, with a mathematical alternative, and it's very dangerous. Mathematics will only give us truth in quantity. It won't give us truth in quality. And it won't give us truth in reality. Okay. So part of Tolkien's message is we have to get rid of the ring, take back control of our own education, undo the programming that we got from academia. And that is the scouring of the Shire, by the way. That's why John Dewey is Saruman. Practical wisdom has taken over academia, and it's not for philosophy and metaphysics anymore. It's just for pleasure, for gain, for worldly, what I want in the world. Okay. And that is the scouring of the Shire. Dewey was also a huge Marxist, big fan of the Industrial Revolution, ultimately became an atheist. But Tolkien was very aware of who he was, so he made Saruman in John Dewey's image. Wormtongue is the Marxist teacher, unmanning the student, convincing the student that, hey, little boy, maybe you're really a little girl. And unmanning them and not teaching them, not truly teaching them, indoctrinating them into Marxism and ultimately hell. So we have to take back the responsibility for education, scour our Shire, get rid of that program, the Marxist program, take responsibility for our health. Don't leave your health in the hands of the fast food industry, only to be served over to the pharmaceutical industry. Okay. And see it all as one. We have to maybe participate in some of the growing of our own food. Read more, resurrect your handwriting, and start writing more by hand. I wrote most of this book. I resurrected my cursive writing, and I wrote most of it on legal pads. In cursive. Yeah. And then I took pictures of it and texted it to Ali, so Ali could look at it and then type it out, because I didn't want artificial intelligence to have. That was my version of the Enigma coding device, so AI couldn't have any part of it while I was writing it, because I don't trust the machine. I don't trust the machine at all. It cannot be trusted. It's anti-human, and it has anti-human goals. So anything I've got, as long as you guys want.
I mean, that largely does it for me, except now I'm sure, somewhere our founder, Phyllis Schlafly, is just overjoyed at the penmanship aspect of the, the drafting of this book. That was a big thing for her. Yeah. But I think that's all I've got, Mason.
Yeah, that's all I've got. Yeah, this is great.
And again, I mean, it's only possible to just scratch the surface of this, but again, the book Mount Doom, by Paul List. Paul, thank you so much. Ali Ghaffari, The Prophecy of Tolkien Revealed. You can get it. Is it readmountdoom.com?
Yep. If you order there, readmountaindoom.com, I make a few dollars there. I'll sign it for you and I'll put it in the mail for you. Or you can get it at Amazon. I make like $1.50 maybe on a book. Amazon makes all the money. But it's doing pretty well. It's got a 4.9 out of 5-star rating. Only got that because one woman claimed that I was promoting a heresy, material heresy regarding my idea of Adam and Eve. She was clearly thinking that I was referring or promoting polygenism, which was made very clear by Pius the 12th in Humani Gentis, his encyclical. And I by no means violate that. I'm right within absolutely Catholic doctrine, Catholic dogma. It's just a different approach, a different look at this whole reality of Adam and Eve. Yeah, it's the only thing that makes sense. Everybody's like, whoa, why didn't anybody think of that before? That makes perfect sense. It made perfect sense to me too.
Well, there's a lot more that makes sense now. I'm going to go. I was telling Mason, I've been slowly assembling, Christopher Tolkien's The History of Middle Earth and all the different. Now, I mean, I've read the Silmarillion, I've read the trilogy.
Good for you.
Times over, but I am now excited to get into all of the rest of it, which has been a long-term plan. Now it's a shorter plan. It's got to come up because the stuff that y'all are putting together, that you have put together in this, and again, I'm excited for volume 2. I hope we get. An expanded version. Just the pieces that are put together, undeniably there, and really exciting to see. So, Paul, thank you so much for spending some time with us on the program here and unpacking just a little bit of this for us. We appreciate your work so much, and we wish you all the best and the Lord's blessings on what you're doing.
I'd love to come back, particularly after you guys have finished the book.
Okay.
We can do that. I love conversations like this, and a lot of times I've done a lot of interviews in the last 6 weeks, probably 50. And it's difficult. Some of them are live on the radio, right there. Boom, you're on.
Right.
And a lot of them are very more or less scripted, and I kind of just do what I can to fall within.
Right.
But I like these free flowing, open conversations.
We like it too. That's why we do it.
Yeah, that's why we do this. So we'll finish the book. We'll have you back. We'll do it again, and that's where we'll leave it. We'll be respectful of the time, but thank you so much. And folks, we'll be right back. We'll close out the show here in just a second, but big thank you to Paul List. And again, go to readmountaindoom.com. You'll find it there.
And buy the book.
Buy the book. Buy the book and dive into it. It's a good
spread the message. It's the message. The message needs to get out there. It's God's providence that it comes into. Boom, there it is, all of a sudden revealed. After 75 years, all of a sudden it's revealed for what it is, right in time to meet the enemy at hand, which is
absolutely
artificial intelligence.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Very good.
God bless you both, guys.
Thank you so much.
Okay.
The end of caucus time is upon us.
Whoa.
That was good.
That was very good, man. I'm so excited to, now with this refreshed take, and we told Paul when we went off air with him, I've read the Silmarillion. I've read that. Well, I said this on air too. I've read the Silmarillion. I've read The Hobbit and the Lord of the Rings trilogy. I've slowly been assembling. I'm actually excited now, over time, slowly to dive into the rest of the history of Middle Earth, all the stuff that Christopher Tolkien has put together.
I'm excited to just keep reading Lord of the Rings. I read like 40 pages last night.
Yeah,
and I just want to keep on reading. And I want to. He did tease that perhaps he might want to be on again. So
well, holy cow, 1,000+ pages. They had to cut it down to 572. That's absolutely incredible. But I tell you what, it drives home for me that whether even if it's a work of fiction or not, there are some just incredible moments of craftsmanship and artistry, and Tolkien in the literature world is one of those where it's just this may be a pinnacle that no one else will reach, because not only is it engaging and he is just a beautiful writer, but there's so much meaning behind it, and just different stuff to pull out every time you read it. So I'm excited to get back into it, but also really excited for this lens being on. Now I want to read the whole thing again, kind of with this lens on, and see, because again, we're fighting maybe a different world than he knew with chatbot, Chat GPT and Grok and everything taking over intellectual property world, this and that and the other. But now the bigger questions, not just even the small specific ones, and as far as who's doing what the industry is doing, I'm excited to go back and read and see some principles I can pull forward. So readmountaindoom.com is where you can pick up that book, and you hear it. Paul himself will mail it to you and sign it. So that's just, I was very glad we had the opportunity to do this, and Kind of seems like a little off the beaten path, but not really when you consider what we normally get to talk about on the show. So episode 2, it'll take me 2 years to finish the book or so. I'm kidding. It won't take me that long, but we will.
We will see you then in 2 years for our next episode.
Nothing gets done till this. No, that's it. That's it for us today. Again, go to unauthorizedcaucus.com, sign up for the link there, or sign up for the notes there. You'll get the episode when it comes out. You'll get all the notes and everything in there. And then, of course, if you're listening on podcast, please give us a 5-star rating and review. We would very much appreciate that. It'll help a long way into getting us into the hands of other people.
It's very easy. We'll give you 5 seconds as long as you're not driving.
Yeah, no, not while you're in the car, but go on your podcast app, wherever you are, give us that 5-star rating.
Okay, you should be done now. That was more than 5 seconds.
Spotify, Apple, it's everywhere. And of course, also on Rumble. And then I want to make sure you go to the primary folks who bring this to you. Again, TREXinc.com, promo code CAUCUS30, wideawakeclothing.com. There's a link in the description below. And of course, phyllisschlafly.com, where you'll find the Phyllis Schlafly Eagles. Great places to get information and cool stuff and to support what we're doing here. So until next time, have a wonderful week or 2, and we'll talk to you again. The next time it'll be
Caucus time.
I gave it to you there.
Caucus
Sorry.
out.
I'm sorry I took it from you the first time.